PossetCast.
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 From Portishead.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of PossetCast from Portishead with me, Roger Whitfield, in what I'm going to be calling the studio. Now, first of all, you're probably wondering, who am I? So let me give you a quick introduction. I'm the chairman of Portishead Town Council at the moment. I'm also an executive on North Somerset Council. I was brought up in Portishead and educated in Highdown and Gordano schools. I'm the owner of Nortec Computers. I have an Open University law degree and I'm a political campaigner for independent representation in politics. So what I'm going to be doing with this podcast is trying to update people in Portishead and to give them information about how their councils work for them. So I'm going to take some time over this series of podcasts to explain the political structures in Portishead, explain what the purpose of each of your councils are, both Portishead Town Council and North Somerset Council, and what the limitations of each of your councils are. And also, I'm going to be informing you of items and discussions that affect Portishead that are of particular interest. So if there's a planning coming up or something that's going to affect a lot of Portishead, then that's what we're going to be talking about. And of course, hopefully, a bit of political chit-chat and banter as well as we go through. So, as it stands at the moment, I think you've had to be living in a cave to not realise that there's a general election coming. So this episode of PossetCast, we're going to be talking about the general election and giving you some information on who your candidates are. So just in case you did miss it, the elections are taking place in Portishead on the 4th of July. And that's both a general election and by-elections for Portishead Town Council East and South wards, but we'll come on to those later on. So a little bit of history. North Somerset constituency was formed in 2010 and won by Liam Fox. Previously this was Woodspring constituency, and before then it was actually North Somerset constituency again. So they seem to have changed the name around a little bit, but on the whole, the constituency was the roughly the same area each time. An interesting fact, in 1910, Joseph King was elected as Liberal MP for North Somerset. We seem to have mainly returned Conservative MPs, mind you, since the 1880s. So a quick rundown, who have we got at the moment? Well, obviously everybody knows Sir Liam Fox. He's been our MP for the last 32 years and he's representing the Conservative Party. So he's defending this seat. Obviously he'll be on your ballot paper. The next one is the Labour candidate, which is Sadiq Al Hassan. He's a pharmacist from Emerson's Green and councillor for Emerson's Green Black Horse Ward. The Liberal Democrats are bringing us Ash Cartman. He stood for election here in 2019, so this is his second time round on this one. The Green candidate is Oscar Livesey Lodwick, and he grew up in Nailsea. In addition, we have a couple of other candidates who haven't stood here before. We've got the Reform candidate, which is, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Alexander Kokofinoftas. As I said, apologies. He moved here from Cyprus in 2018. The Reform Party, I don't think existed in 2019, so they clearly didn't stand any. But if you're unsure as to who they are, the party leader is now Nigel Farage. Then we have the Workers' Party, and standing for them is Sunil Basu. The Workers' Party are a left-wing political party. Their number one aim seems to be, from their website, that they want to leave NATO. And again, the party didn't stand in 2019. because I don't think they existed back then, and the party leader is George Galloway. You may have seen him on the news. He's a slightly divisive political character, but yes, he's been around for a long time. If you took a look at the nomination papers that went in, you will notice that we actually had the Women's Equality Party putting up a candidate called Miriam Gosling-Gage. Nomination papers weren't completed correctly for her, so they won't be standing in this election. They didn't stand in 2019. The party leader is Mandu Reid, and the party was founded in 2015. But you won't get that option on your ballot paper because they did something wrong on their nomination papers. So, now we know who all the candidates are. Let's have a look at how they did in the last election and what their predictions are for this election. So last time round, the Conservatives, Liam Fox, clearly won. He got 32,801 votes, which is 52.9% of the vote. Labour came up second. That was, of course, Hannah Young, and they've got a new candidate this time, but they came second with 15,265 votes, which is 24.6% of the vote. And then in third place were the Liberals, Ash Cartman, who's standing again this time. He got 11,051, which is 17.8% of the vote. The Greens equally stood last time, although it was a different candidate again. They got 2,938 votes, which is 4.7% of the vote. Now, the interesting thing is that I've had a look on electoralcalculus.co.uk today to see what the predictions are for the 2024 election. And it's a lot tighter than it's ever been. The Conservatives are predicted to get 27.3% of the vote. Labour's predicted to get 29.9% of the vote, which would put them in first place. Lib Dems are again predicted for about 17.3% of the vote, and the Greens are predicted for 8.4%, with the Reform Party being their first time out, not having a previous record, seem to be predicted at an incredible 17.1%. So the Reform Party, they sort of grew out of UKIP. So I think there's quite a bit of previous UKIP support going on in there. So if that's right, and that's always a big if, because these opinion polls are never 100% accurate, but if that's right, they are predicting a Labour gain from the Conservatives, which, bearing in mind that this constituency has been pretty much always Conservative from the beginning of time, is a really big change if it happens. At the end of the day, it's down to you. You'll be electing. So you're the ones who are going to decide who gets in and who doesn't. So we've all seen probably too much, but certainly quite a bit of political coverage on the TV, maybe on our Facebook feeds, Twitter, whatever. And really, it's not been, from my perspective at least, it's not been the best campaign so far. There's been an awful lot of negative campaigning going on. Lots of cries of dishonesty from all sorts of people. But is this really what we want to see? Is this where we want our politics to go? To just listen to people having a go at each other all the time, telling us why we shouldn't vote for the other party? Personally, I'd like to see something a little bit different. I'd like to hear what it is that each party will do for us, for the people of Portishead, for the people of North Somerset. Not why their opponents didn't do what they thought they should have. That's a debate for another day. So I'm going to be listening very carefully to the people who are making their claims and seeing whether or not they're actually coming up with anything positive, because a negative campaign really turns me off, and I know it really turns a lot of people off as well. So, moving on from the general election briefly, we'll have a quick look at the local by-elections. Now, if you're in Portishead, it depends where you are as to whether or not you're going to get an opportunity to vote on these town council by-elections. The reason we're having these is because 2 councillors have resigned from Portishead Town Council, and the electors in the wards for those 2 councillors have requested an election, and therefore we will go forward to an election. So the first one is Portishead East Ward, where we're going to have 2 candidates. One is Paul Gardner. He's a Portishead independent candidate and previously a chair of Portishead Town Council. And then we've got Sam Barnes, who is on the paper as being an independent, but introduced himself initially as being a Labour candidate. So we'd probably like to have a quick word with him about what's going on there, why the switch from Labour to independent. And hopefully we'll get a chat with him at some point to find out why that is. Now, you're probably going to be thinking, well, what's the difference between a Portishead independent and an independent candidate? And I can quite get that. So let's have a look at what Portishead independents do and see whether or not we can make some sense of this one. So Portishead Independents was a group set up to promote more independent councillors in local government. And that's literally what they were there to do. So they campaign for them, they fundraise, they leaflet for them, just to get more independent representation in local government. But obviously, you've got to be careful who you're supporting. So they had a couple of asks of anybody who wants to stand as a Portishead independent. The first one, really simple and straightforward. If you want to stand as a Portishead independent, you just need to subscribe to the values of Portishead independence, which are openness, honesty, etc. Essentially the Nolan principles. So you have to say that you stand by the core values. So this isn't a manifesto, these are just core values. And secondly, you have to not be a member of a political party. I think that's quite straightforward. If you're a member of the Labour, the Conservatives, Lib Dems, Greens, whatever, then clearly you're not independent. So you have to demonstrate your independence. If you are already a member of a political party, Portishead Independents will support you as an independent as long as you relinquish that membership. And I think that's quite straightforward, and it leaves it very easy for people to understand that when we say Portishead Independents, we mean somebody who is verified as being truly independent. And that leads on to what an independent candidate is. Well, I mean, quite clearly then, an independent candidate is somebody who says they're independent, regardless of whether or not they are a member of any political party. And we've seen this quite a lot, certainly down at North Somerset, in a lot of parish councils as well around the region, where people have stood for one council as, say, a Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, whatever, and been elected, and stood for a parish council as an independent and been elected. And I think that muddies the waters. If you're a member of a party, then really you're not an independent candidate. Now in South Ward, we have Miriam Afzal, who is a Portishead independent. She's standing this time round. And Yuhi Parkinson, who's standing for Labour. Now, you may recognise her from the 2023 election when she stood for the Lib Dems. For some reason, she's decided to switch from Lib Dems to Labour this time. But in politics, you know what? Sometimes you join a party and it turns out not to be the right fit for you. So I don't think we can hold that against her. Everyone's entitled to change their mind. That's the way it goes. So she's now the Labour candidate in Portishead South Ward. So what I'm going to try to do is get some interviews with your Portishead Town Council candidates and as many general election candidates as possible over the next couple of weeks. In particular, I want to be asking them about their plans for the NHS, our railway link in Portishead, further housing development in Portishead, protection of the green belt, and of course the economy. And hopefully they'll be coming along, answering these questions and giving you a better insight into where they stand as candidates. I think it's very important that we quiz them on the local issues as well as the national issues, because as Portishead, we're making a selection here for who we want to represent us, and I think we need to make sure that they are all cited on the local issues. So moving on, one of the big issues at the moment is the Portishead rail link. So we need to take a look at where we're going with this, because things haven't gone according to plan in the past, as you've probably seen. I don't know, is it 20, 30 years now this has been promised for, and time again it keeps getting cut off at the last minute, or actually sometimes just cut off at the beginning. So as it stands at the moment, I think we've got further with this project than we've ever got in North Somerset. We've actually seen a main contractor who has been assigned the task of sorting all the work out. And over the last sort of year to 18 months in the council, we've seen lots of planning applications come through for the train line, the work around the train line, the ecological work, and those continue to come through. That work is still ongoing. I know you may not actually see it out there on the ground, you just see them hacking back the weeds every few months, but the work is ongoing and the plans are in. So where we stand at the moment is the Department of Transport have sort of agreed to make up the funding shortfall in the project. And every time there's a delay, prices go up and there's a funding shortfall. So unsurprisingly, there's another funding shortfall to be made up. This was all going fine. The Department of Transport said they were literally just waiting for sign off on it. And then they were going to give the okay for North Somerset Council to put the business plan in, which they'd already sort of previewed anyway. So that was going to be very straightforward after they'd had the sign off of the funding to actually just get on, tick off the business plan, and there we were, full steam ahead as such. But what's actually happened is somebody called a snap election and Parliament got dissolved. And no, they didn't get it signed off before Parliament got dissolved. So here we are now, there's no Parliament, there's nobody to sign off the extra funding. So the project is, well, it's still going ahead. Yep, they're still working on it. There's still the main contractor doing his job. But when it comes to what was going to be September, when they were going to start the work in earnest on building the stations, we don't have funding in place for it. So we now have to wait until after the general election to see if they will get sign-off. But with a new government and a new minister, I don't know how easy that's going to be. And just after the general election, unfortunately, is the summer recess. So that's where the Parliament breaks up a bit like the schools do for about 6 weeks, do absolutely nothing. So clearly, if they have summer recess, there's going to be no decisions made until September. And then just after September, we're into conference season, where they again take a break to do all their political conferences. So it is debatable as to whether or not this is going to make it through this year even. Now, there have been rumours, and these are now open rumours. They were, when I first wrote this, they were just they were quiet rumours, but they're now open rumours in Westminster that Labour may be cancelling or shortening the summer recess. So potentially, if they do, then there might be time to get the Portishead Railway project up and running before the deadline for starting work in September. I would not hold your breath on this one. It's a really big if and but, isn't it? But at least there's a potential that it may not be pushed off another year. So when could we reasonably expect spades in the ground if summer recess does continue? And I think probably, and this is where the problems come in, if it's not going to be September, if they can't get it signed off in time for then it's not likely to be till early next year. But if you run into spring and you get into the bird nesting season, then most projects have to stop for that, which means that it won't be till the following September. So that's a full year's delay if they don't pull their fingers out and actually get this signed off. Now, there's not much any of us can do about this, but what we can do is we can ask the candidates. We can write to our MP, but there's, again, no point at the moment till after the election. But immediately after the election, you could write to your MP and just point out, whoever that MP is, how important you feel this link is for Portishead. When the candidates come round and knock on your door, and of course it is that season, so they might well be knocking on your door, maybe you should just take a minute to explain to them how important you think this is for Portishead, because it's only if we let them all know how important we think it is that there's any chance that we might get this pushed through this year instead of next. At some point in the very near future, I'm going to bring you an interview to explain what our station's going to look like and what changes will need to be made locally to accommodate it. There's quite a lot of information in this, so I think we'll do this one as a separate later on, and there's quite a few diagrams and drawings to be shown. So I think that's going to be really interesting, but we'll probably push that off for a week or two before we get to that one. Now, I think there's a lot of things that go on in Portishead during the summer, and it's really difficult sometimes for everybody to get a grip on what's going on, where and when. And I've taken a look around, and I found it really difficult myself to find out a proper calendar of events. So I'm going to do some more research on this, and we're going to try and get together a proper calendar of events, which I'm going to bring you all through the year in these podcasts so that you can see what's going on. I have, however, put together a few that I've managed to get together in the last couple of days. And starting with Sunday the 23rd of June, we have the Portishead Community Pride event at the Youth Centre, midday to 6 p.m. 27th of June, we have the Portishead Eating Disorders Support Group at the Folk Hall, Fedden Room, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. for over 18s only. 27th and 28th of July, we have the Portishead Summer Show in the Portishead Show Field. Tickets are available from portisheadsummershow.com with a discount if you book early. Saturday the 10th of August, we have an inflatable theme park, again in the Portishead Show Field. Portishead Marina have listed 2 events for the rest of this year, which is the Eat Portishead Food Festival, which they say is August 2024. So clearly they haven't got an exact date for it yet. And the Portishead Arts Festival in September 2024. I hope to bring you an interview with the organisers of the Portishead Arts Festival well before September 24, so that you know more about it, because that's one of the really good ones that are very popular in Portishead. So, coming up, we're going to have interviews with candidates in the upcoming elections, a closer look at our proposed railway and potential timings, further coverage of the elections, of course, and after the elections, I'm going to be bringing you interviews with your town and district councillors, explaining what Portishead Town Council does for you, what North Somerset Council does for you, and topical planning permissions in Portishead, and much, much more. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to be talking to you again very soon.